Just waiting to load in 1 second.
A warm welcome to everybody who's joining our session today. I'm Steffen, your host, CEO at Custom Alliance, and with me I have two incredible guests. Matt, CEO at Mews, the company which is currently disrupting probably not only the PMS space. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you.
And Jordan, CEO at Hotel Tech Report, the most important platform for everything around hotel tech. Welcome, Jordan.
Thanks for having me, Steffen.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you both and to have the ability or the option to talk to you about the future of hospitality tech. But before we really jump into the topic, I would like to ask you a question which is not necessarily linked to hospitality tech, just to kick it off and warm up a little bit. And the question is, what has been an innovation or a technology you were really amazed by lately, and why? And to give you a little bit more time to think about that, I'll give an example from my side. So I was actually completely stunned a couple of weeks ago when I was watching the successful return of the SpaceX Starship booster to its launch pad. I don't know if you've seen the video. It's been out there, so check it out on YouTube. It's really amazing. And it's amazing not because I like sci-fi and it really looked like sci-fi, but it's hard to imagine how many things have to work perfectly together to make that happen. People, processes, and systems. And in particular, I really admire the spirit and the mindset behind it, because there have been a couple of attempts which some people would probably consider a failure, but SpaceX looks at them more as an opportunity to learn, right? They dive into the data, they identify problems, they improve things, and they came back each and every time better and stronger until they finally pulled it off. And I think that is something every organization needs to have, that kind of mindset, if you really would like to achieve great success and not just settle for the status quo or average. And that's why I like that example. And with that, I would like to hand it over to you, Matt, perhaps, and get your example.
Yeah, for me, it's gonna have to be AI. But just seeing the Claude demo, I think it was last week or a week and a half ago, the Claude 3.5, I think it was, where they show that you can give a computer instructions and it just starts to do it directly on your screen. And as I was watching that, instantly I was like, great, our salespeople, they should be, whatever we say on a call with a customer and all of the questions we ask, instantly that they should be able to transcribe that into the CRM without a human having to sit for an hour after a sales call trying to find all the fields. And like the way that it can help in a hotel, in the accounting department to process things that they're doing manually. Like it has such an impact instantly, just seeing how smart the systems are with just some very limited instructions. And this is just the beginning of it. I think that was such an exciting demo, because we've already been talking about large language models for a year and a half, 2 years now. And it's starting to have real implications for businesses, so that you don't have to scale and then deploy humans across the business. You can actually start to scale with the same team, but grow the business. And that's a really exciting thing.
Cool. And you, Jordan?
Totally. I mean, honestly, Matt stole mine.
Sorry.
I think
it was double exciting.
I think I'm going to start a lawsuit since it's election day. So I agree with Matt that basically this combination of RPA and LLM. So it's you're basically now able to talk to your computer. It signals, for me, it signaled a platform shift away from UI and software, which is just massive. And we're still it's still years out, but the technology's there. It's more the social and behavioral stuff that needs to happen. But I would say outside of that, also Google's Notebook LLM has been pretty insane to look at. So basically with Google Notebook LLM, you can ingest massive amounts of documents, and you can basically talk with those documents. So you could upload a hospitality textbook on revenue management, and literally with no knowledge, say, our RevPAR is up, but our occupancy is down. Here's what's happening with our competition. What's the most likely thing that's happening in my city? And feed it information and have a conversation. You could also turn it into an interactive dialogue podcast that literally sounds like two people are talking, that not only ingests the data, understands it, and contextualize it, but will literally make off the cuff jokes that are like related to the content that you fed into it to make it more digestible and entertaining for you. And it literally sounds like two people talking. So I think all of these components coming together is just like, again, signaling a platform shift, signaling like the next wave of technology. And it's like, I think people always say that like the innovations come faster than you think, and then they change the world slower than you think. And I think like we're seeing all this tech is here, and it's going to take time to figure out like where we compartmentalize that. And we'll talk more about how that impacts hospitality. But yeah, the tech right now is mind blowing. And if I had to say another one, probably like we have Waymo here in LA. So you can just get super drunk and drive around town with an automated car, which is like the best thing ever. So that's another one that's blown me away.
Okay, great. Thanks for sharing. I was sure that AI will pop up a couple of times during our discussion.
In your day-to-day, do you Google or do you use ChatGPT, or you use an AI model to answer questions now? Like I find myself using AI more than I use Google in day-to-day life.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree.
Yeah, I would say it's a mix. It depends on the thing that I'm looking to do. I think Google, if I'm looking for more like step by step, or like, even if my dad was in my backyard trying to figure out what kind of tree was there, and he like took a picture and put it in ChatGPT. It's stuff that just like Google isn't capable of, right? And it will be, and obviously they have the technology, but I think it's still a mix. But there will be some things that are better with a list of links, and some things that are better with having a conversation, and certainly anything informational, navigational. Like Google has a ton of searches for like, what is hospitality? Like, I don't know who's searching this, but there's a lot of people searching it, and it's like you don't need like a list of 20 articles to figure that out.
That's crazy.
All right. So let's focus on our topic a little bit more before we really dive into AI in depth. And then perhaps let's first have a look where we actually currently stand. So, I mean, there are a lot of studies out there showing the increasing adoption, increasing investment into hospitality tech. Jordan, you obviously have been engaged with the hospitality industry for many years now. What has been and what is still driving this development, and what have been major developments in general over the last couple of years from your perspective? AI being one of them, but other developments
For sure.
as well.
I look at innovation in the hotel industry as somewhat cyclical. And I look at the era when Customer Alliance, Mews, Cloudbeds, a lot of these companies were created as, a huge era of innovation and new companies coming on the scene that are now reaching maturity and becoming platforms and really getting to scale. And I've honestly been shocked by, we're in this phase where the technology is there, but the applications are not yet happening. And so one of the things that I thought was going to happen was that AI would catalyze all these new incredible startups in our space. And I've basically not seen that. And my hypothesis of why that is, sure, there's a couple of them here and there. Some of them seem like features rather than products or platforms. But the reason is because if you have a platform like Mews that has billions of dollars of transaction data, of guest data, of occupancy data, you can now apply LLMs to that data, and that's where the power is. And anybody and their mom can figure out how to like build a chat GPT bot. But if you don't have the data, it's kind of worthless. And so all these startups are like trying to come up with these new cool applications. But the reality is it's the Mewses and the Customer Alliances of the world that have access to the data that can now plug these tools in. And so when I say that like new innovations, it's not like new companies that are popping up to solve these new problems that are so exciting, which I thought would happen. It's the established companies that are sitting on huge amounts of data that have built their architecture and their data structures the right way that can now basically unleash so much from that, where their customers don't have to look at dashboards that nobody could read anymore, or that even if they can read them, they don't want to look at them, or that they, we have dashboards in our business where I think it was like a web traffic dashboard, and our analytics team put it together. It was like day by day web traffic. It varies by like 90% on some days, and you literally can't tell anything. And I think in a lot of hotel software, there's so many dashboards that nobody looks at or that doesn't mean anything. And now you can actually converse with the data and actually get more out of it. And so it's the established players who are for sure pushing forward the innovation.
Okay. But I mean, what you're saying is like we have the technology now, we have the data and the technology to make sense of it. But Matt, I mean, looking at reality, I mean, there's still a gap between, what we are capable of probably today and what the adoption is like in the industry. So what do you see as barriers or challenges still, like on an operational level, on a daily level for hoteliers to really go into a broader, faster adoption of the technology?
I think the brands are the barrier. I think the independent hotels are already there and they're outperforming on EBITDA lines, the big brands. And the problem is that you want to put a brand on your roof so that you can prove out that you're going to get business in the door. But actually, no one's talking about the cost line underlying the revenue that you're bringing in. And the independent hoteliers are more and more pulling away from the traditional brands because actually they might not need that much revenue because they don't have this heavy cost base that you have with these massive brand hotels and the brand requirements. And the brands are not moving into the cloud at the pace that they should be. And large language models are hitting us like left, right, and center. We're deploying features in a live system. We deployed this thing and it excited the hell out of me. And it isn't live yet, but I've now started seeing it getting trained on live data, where in the guest profile, we see the whole history of that guest across the chain. We see their reservation notes, their customer notes. We see what they've spent in the hotel. We see their dietary requirements, what car they have. And all of that we consume and we give it in a tweet size to the customer or to the receptionist on check-in. So they know that you stayed with us before, you stayed at a different hotel, and you're very likely to buy an upgrade to a suite because you did that last time. And you're likely to travel with your kids. And that's stuff we've never been able to use. Like we've had the data and we've never been able to use it, but we now consume it and we're about to push it out to 5,500 hotels. And that's not the big brand hotels. It's the independents and smaller groups that we've started with. And they're going to out innovate the big brands until they step up to the challenge of figuring out, okay, maybe it is actually time to move into the cloud and not cloud hosted. It's cloud native. That's going to make the difference. And I can't believe, we're still talking about cloud, like that's the innovation. But unfortunately, unless you're in the cloud, you can't leverage this technology. And yes, most of those brands have a system on a local server in a back office, and they're stuck until they've made that move.
Yeah, it's interesting, your perspective. I mean, when I'm looking at our platform, I always separate like what I call the systems perspective, like the functionality we are providing, like, I don't know, gathering feedback or collecting reviews and managing them. But as I said, for me, it's more important to have that data perspective, really, because I think that's the real treasure we can tap into to really leverage or enable our customers to get more insights or it come to really actionable insights and stuff like that. Obviously, I'm from our perspective, I'm very much interested in guest feedback. So Matt, are you already integrating or are you planning to integrate guest feedback into Mews as well? And what kind of use cases do you see there? What kind of value can you bring to the customers with that?
Yeah, we've opened up the API so that partners can actually push, if you get feedback from a complaint customer, you can push that back into the guest profile. And then we'll surface it through the AI in those little notes because, again, like you get a massive complaint letter, no one's going to ever read that again, unless I give it to you in one sentence, what was the core of it. So partners can all just start pushing, I want as much data in our system as humanly possible. And you don't need to structure it. You just ram it in those notes and we will consume it for you. And I think that's the biggest difference. Previously, you had to have a field for every type of thing and every type of note. The beauty of this large language model is like just ram it into one big blob of text and we will consume it in the right way so we can surface it to the right people at the right moment. So the more data that partners can send our way, like whatever you're collecting, send it my way. I love it.
Cool, will do. Jordan, I mean, in general, if you look at the hospitality industry overall, what do you think, what's the current state with respect to, making and driving data-driven decisions, like collecting whatever guest feedback or in general guest data? Where do we stand there? Is it something which is applied across the board already, or?
Yeah, I think when I think about guest feedback, I kind of think about, again, back to that innovation cycle, and the guest feedback companies like you guys and several others kind of like matured. Every hotel realizes they have to respond to reviews on Google, TripAdvisor, the OTAs, et cetera. And then it kind of like, it flatlined a little bit, and then everyone started moving towards like trying to do service recovery or proactive. So having dashboards that show you, your pool isn't heated, or things that you might not otherwise like realize. But it was, I would say, like, across the board, obviously some were better than others. There was like a B product. And now I think with LLMs, once again, you could be a lot more proactive, and the software can actually alert people and give them like actual advice based on the data. I mean, obviously we have more than 60,000 reviews on Hotel Tech Report now. I think Mews has like 1,000 reviews or something. Who the hell is going to read 1,000 reviews? But now our users can search through the reviews. We use AI to pull out keywords. They can then filter by those keywords the things that are frequently mentioned by users. And so and we have AI summaries that basically summarize the key points, pros and cons from all of those reviews. So we're taking like tons of data, as Matt said, and we're actually like making it actionable for the first time, which I think is really exciting. And we're doing that. Obviously, we're like the Christopher Nolan version of like incepting it, because we're getting reviews of the reviews companies, but I think it's the same kind of concepts for hotels of like, now the data's more usable. Like Booking.com just rolled out, I think it was like review summaries and then AI search filters today. I think it was like a couple days ago. And so that's happening on the OTAs. So now not only do the hotels have proactive, you can get an alert of when something's happening frequently, and you don't even have to look through all those reviews or look into a dashboard. But now the travelers can actually use those reviews in a lot more of an effective way. And I think we're all using review summaries and keyword semantic analysis on Amazon and review search. And so all those things are coming to travel, which makes reviews 1,000 times more important and more impactful than they were before. And I once again, it's that innovation cycle where like when TripAdvisor and Yelp started, reviews were like critical. And then it kind of became table stakes. I was like, I got to get reviews here and there. And like, I'm just doing it to do it. And now it's like, oh, actually, you're going to get business insights and your customers are really going to find this information useful. So it's kind of like driving that next catalyst for innovation.
Okay.
So Steffen, what are you doing with AI? I'm just really curious how you're leveraging it then.
On our side?
Yeah.
I mean, we have, one is definitely we are responding to reviews based on AI. So we provide answers. That's one element. The other element is really like what I mentioned earlier. We are diving into the data. And so far, we have like back in the days, it was called semantic analysis, right? So you had word clouds and things like that, which are not ideal, obviously, because they only give you so much information or so much context. And what we are doing right now is really developing our own algorithms based on existing models. So we can really provide our guests with more actionable insights, meaning, it's not just like, oh, you have to improve your breakfast, but what is it specifically you need to improve there? And also, how do you compare with others in a much more easier way? And also making it more accessible to people, so they don't need to have the skill set and come up with correlations or whatever and really crunch the data, but they can easily ask these questions like they are getting more and more used to, right, from ChatGPT or other models, and just simply ask that question and they get the results of it. Nice. So one topic is more making more sense of the data, and the other topic is making it more accessible. I think that's a key element as well for our customers to use it, so they don't have to develop specific skills really to get the information and the answers they really want.
Yeah. Just to be able to ask a question, I think it's so powerful because they don't have to start digging through reports to find that little nugget that they've been looking for, but actually just asking the question outright in the search box. Like that's a thing that I think will get people excited when they actually save so much time to just get to the answer. I think a lot of the reports that traditionally in hotels that we've needed will just disappear over time because there's just no need for those traditional reports, because you just ask the system, what was my ADR yesterday? Why would I have to have a report to find these things?
Yeah, and for me, it's to some degree, it's something which is not always top of mind, but it's actually the key innovation behind LLMs and like the interaction with that information, right? It's on one hand, it's a very, very powerful tool to crunch data and get insights, but it makes it very easy for people to access. And I think that's one of the key elements which comes with these AI tools, LLMs in general, which is really driving the power of it.
Yeah, and I think like there's also the component of making it easier to access the reviews, but now for you guys as a review and survey provider, software provider, you could potentially ingest P&L data, and then you could combine that with the review data and not just say what's going on in the reviews. You say, prioritize my 10 opportunities that I have to grow my business, my NOI based on this P&L. And so it can then read the reviews, see the feedback, prioritize based on what's most likely to drive profit. And so by combining different data sources, you can like unlock things that are way more than just making the reviews themselves more usable.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We've been building.
So, I mean, but to really to fully leverage that the value of the data, I mean, we probably agree that, I mean, it does make sense if the data we generate in different systems just sit in siloed systems, right? I mean, we spoke about that. Data needs to flow freely between different systems and can be exchanged. Also, what we get as a key requirement from our customers in general when they are using different systems is that they expect these systems to ideally integrate seamlessly out of the box, right? Because they don't want to deal with integrations or setting up interfaces and things like that. And I mean, after all, that's one of the key reasons why companies like Mews and us are collaborating closely, right? However, what I see in reality is there's still room for improvement. So Matt, I would like to know from your side, how can we as tech providers improve or collaborate better to really provide these integrated solutions for our customers?
Like it's funny because I was last week in Austria and meeting with a number of hoteliers who were working with a different system, and they were talking about how they had a 1.5 way connection. And I was like, well, that last 50% kind of, you need, because otherwise you're still verifying everything that happens. And like, I think hoteliers need to understand how good a connection actually is before they enable it, and that it's a proper API-based two-way interface and what data flows between it. And a lot of hoteliers don't always verify what the data flow is. And then they're surprised, well, I assumed that that's how it works. And unfortunately, because we are a very slow-moving industry, not all systems have the same connection between them, and you have to verify it. And when you have a full two-way connectivity that's API-based, it honestly becomes let me just switch it on, let me try it out for 3 months, and if I don't like it, I'll switch it off and I'll move on to the next provider, because not every solution is the right solution for every single hotelier, as Jordan probably knows. You got to kiss a lot of frogs to find the one prince that's in there that's the right solution for your hotel. And that's the same for most solutions out there. You just don't know until you try it whether it's the thing that you need. Whereas I remember in the olden days, last year, 2 years ago, when people had to make a major bet on a system, because you're going to be stuck with it for 5 years because you're making a major investment into that integration. That isn't the case anymore. There is barely any setup fee for most of these systems. You just enable it, you activate it, and if you like it, then you keep it. And if you don't, you switch off to the next system. So that mindset still is stuck in our hoteliers' minds, where they have to go for approvals to the general manager who has to sign off this notice because it's a major investment. Actually, we're talking about 30 euros a month for some systems. Like, just switch it on. If you don't like it, it's 30 euros you've just lost, and that's worth a bet. But there's definitely a mindset change that has to happen in hotels, where you might not need approval for small sign-offs where you're just doing little tests, and if it works, then great, and it might have an outsized impact. And I think that's the biggest shift that still needs to happen in hotels, where everything has to be approved from the top down, and these are not big bets.
Yeah, it's more that iterative approach, right? Testing things and trying things out.
Yeah,
but it's I mean, we were talking about like barriers. So you think that that's still one of the major barriers, really, like jumping into that, and because a lot of people are more conservative still, knowing like the old times, the old systems.
Yeah, like I see a hesitation to switch on different integrations because they're like, oh, but the cost, and it adds up so quickly. And I'm like, it's not that expensive. Like, we spend as hoteliers, we spend a very small percentage of our revenue on technology, way less than most other industries. And I think that's the underlying challenge, that we're just like, we deploy humans for everything, for data entry jobs that could be completely automated. But, there's just this hesitation as an industry to just try out technologies and see how much efficiency it could drive, how much more revenue. We're seeing across our platform, for example, that less than 50% have a revenue management system. And I'm just like, why wouldn't you have a revenue management system? Like, surely we've all been convinced that a system that works for you 24/7, day and night, and it's way smarter than the smartest human, is a better solution. but still we're seeing this slow adoption of revenue management systems, and 50% is really high, for any systems. If you look at more legacy PMSs, you're probably looking at close to 10% of hotels having a revenue management system because they don't have many options and integrations, and it takes a long time. But I still find 50% incredibly low for, an era when everyone realizes that technology is incredibly smart and efficient.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, especially talking about small hotels or small hotel chains, they quite often, they don't have dedicated resources, right, to define, implement, and run their tech stack. So, Jordan, what would be your advice to really, like, how could they make choices? How can they make sure that the systems they choose, they integrate smoothly, and with the system they choose, they really achieve their goals? What would you advise them? How should they proceed with that? What should be the approach?
Yeah. I mean, I think we all know it always starts with having a cloud PMS with an open API and easy connectivity. So if you have an old on-prem PMS, like, you're just waiting to die. So switch it immediately, because it's extremely costly for you, and it's only a matter of time. So why not do it now? Because the other piece is companies in the software ecosystem, they don't want to build those integrations because they're extremely expensive to maintain. So building an integration to Mews versus an old school on-prem solution, the startups will do it all day. So anytime you're getting like a new innovation, not just like startup new company, like startup growth stage raised a Series B of $20 million, whatever, they don't have the resources still at that scale to maintain an on-prem connection, and so it's not worth it for them. And so you're going to find your tool set is limited. And I always say this, like, in venture capital, when you see like specialized venture capital funds, like, we only invest in this kind of founder or whatever, or this type of industry. It's like 95% of venture capitalists are not making money for their investors. And so if you narrow the companies you can invest in to only one industry or only one founder who looks a certain way, you're completely screwed. And so I think for hotels, it's very hard to build a great tech stack and have a profitable operation. And so if you have this shitty old PMS that limits your ecosystem of what you can integrate with, then you're setting yourself up for failure. And there's not much experimentation you can do. And I think to Matt's point, it's not just about, so I think the Kaizen, consistent iteration over a long period of time and optimization is super critical. But even if you love a tool that you're using, it's just not smart to never try something else. Like, even like, just demo the competitor, see if there's interesting features. And if you love working with the company you're working with and the competitor builds a feature that you want, tell your reps so that they'll put it on the product roadmap. Like, you should constantly be in the market, doing diligence, exploring, and going back to Matt, not to go on this tangent, but I think the brands have stifled innovation in the industry by picking like, oh, this is Hilton's one guest messaging provider. It's like, okay, you know what happens when you tell the world that you only have one provider? They gouge you on price and they slow down innovation because they don't have to do anything and they get complacent. And so even as an independent, you should constantly be making your providers feel like they have to deliver for you. This is software as a service. You're not just paying for like a car or a house, like, you're paying over the long term for what the roadmap of that company is. And you need to keep them honest. And the only way you can do that is by monitoring innovation yourself and without having any integrations or any options of apps to go to. Like, you can't do that.
Yeah. I mean, that's the whole background of Mews, how it started, right, Matt?
Like we struggle. So honestly, we were hoteliers and we just wanted to run a hotel. Yeah. And we wanted to have this great guest app, and we just got stuck because we're like, how the hell do we get guest data so that we can invite them to download this app? And no one had an open API, and we didn't have 50K to give to the industry leader to get access to an API. And we're like, screw it. And we went to the owner of the hotel and we said, give us 50K and we'll build you a system so that we can actually open this up. And I think when it was a few years in when we asked our CTO, like, you opened up the API for this one customer. Do you mind if I stick it on the website and see if anyone else wants to integrate? And I think that really snowballed massively when suddenly we realized that we weren't the only ones that struggled to get access to this API. Suddenly everyone is. And today, obviously, that's shifted massively. And we've got some really formidable competitors with great API endpoints. And great, because that means more activity. There's more startups that can now build without having to build a PMS from the ground up. Because honestly, that's been I wouldn't recommend people to build a PMS because it was hard. It was really hard for a very long time. But hopefully now you can build really exciting startups, not having to build for 5-6 years until you get to a really strong core system. You can just build the exciting app on top of it and just start running.
Okay. All right. I mean, so far we have been talking a lot about technical topics. Obviously, hotel tech or hospitality tech is the topic of the discussion. But I think at the end, everything has to be a focus on the guest or the guest experience, right? That's the main purpose. So for new technology, to have that in mind and contribute to the better guest experience at the end is essential. However, I think you can't talk about guest experience without talking about guest expectations on the other hand. So Jordan, I would love to know, where do you see, what is the guest expectation today when it comes to their guest journey and how technology is supporting that?
Yeah, I mean, I think to start any conversation about guest expectations, you probably have to start with price. And like when you go fly Delta One, you have a very different expectation than Ryanair. And so like the price typically sets your expectation. And so from a guest experience, I think from a technology perspective, we want things to be as seamless as possible. And so when you're on a Ryanair type hotel experience, you want it to be fast, you want it to be like easy and done for you. And when you're on a Delta One, you want someone to greet you and you want a glass of champagne when you get there and you maybe want a massage in the lounge or whatever. And so I think guest expectations from a technology perspective, the technology should enable fully seamless service delivery, like every single time, whether you're Motel 6 or whether you're the St. Regis. And we're all used to being on our phones all day. And so obviously, Matt, I know you guys are working on some stuff with Mobile Key and Apple Wallet, and that's kind of like the last barrier, which again is a behavioral thing, like Apple charging like whatever X cents per key downloaded or whatever the crazy number is they have. But I think from a guest expectations perspective, it's that I'm going to get there. There's going to be a minimal wait time because I can give you my credit card authorization while I'm still on the plane, and that when I arrive, either I can have a mobile key or I can just have somewhere to print my key at a kiosk really quickly. And so I think people just expect all of that to happen seamlessly and enabled by technology. Again, it's just we're trained on, we use Instacart for our groceries and we use Netflix for our streaming, and like all these things that we're used to at home, we just expect to have that when we're on the road with us at this point, and there's no reason that we shouldn't be able to expect to have that.
Yeah. Okay. Matt, you love to talk about the topics. I think one of your Met Talks, by the way, highly recommended, check it out on Mews.com, is about that topic. What's your take on that? How do you see that guest expectation and technology? What kind of role plays it?
I think the guest should choose what experience they're looking for. If they're looking for the self-service experience, they should be able to do that in any type of hotel. And if they want the handhold experience where someone else types in your passport data into a system, great, you should be able to choose that. And that's the optionality that we build in, and we can just say, hey, if you're a luxury hotel and you want us to automate the hell out of it so that you actually use your humans to create real genuine experiences, you can. But if you're a luxury hotel and you prefer to type data into the system because you think that that's a luxury experience, you can also do that. But I think the most important thing is give the choice to the guests. And that's the optionality that we've built in. We've got a fully, you can check in on your own smartphone. We have a kiosk solution. You can turn the kiosk into an employee assisted solution so that I can walk into the lobby and sit down with you at a sofa, or you can have a giant marble reception desk where you can just run Mews like you've always run the old legacy systems. And it's just, there's a spectrum of offers that we have. And then you just have to think, what's my hotel? What's the segment? What's the experience I want to create? And then you just build the solution there. Whereas traditionally, you had to have a reception desk because these systems had to be plugged into a wall. You had to print out registration cards. You had to take credit cards on a physical device. You had to get this plastic key in the hand of the customer. None of those things are a problem anymore. But what I've seen is hoteliers struggle with, well, what should I do? And I'm like, honestly, that is your decision. You're building a unique brand, and there's so little differentiation between hotel brands today. I could not tell you what the difference between several of these global brands is. And this is an opportunity for them to say, right, we're going to go full in like kiosk style check-in, or we're going to get rid of all of the check-in completely because you could. And I just think there's an opportunity now to properly differentiate as a brand through technology, and so few hotels have embraced it. And it's a pity, because that's how guests will remember you. And most hotels, and I check into a hotel at least once or twice a week, I don't remember most of them, because the experience is very flat.
No.
Totally.
So what I mean, you mentioned personalization, contactless check-in, and things like that. What are some projects you're working on? What is expected from you over the next couple of months? What's coming?
Like we've really said, okay, we need to own that whole end-to-end experience. So we rebuilt our whole guest check-in, for example. So now we do the registration card and the payments. We've added upsell of room categories, upsell of products. We added like the flexibility of booking services. Like I could rent my bike, I could park my car, I could book a co-working desk, all in the online check-in flow. I can cancel my reservation. I can start to message the reception instantly. And then lastly, I can download my digital key on my phone. If you're using Assa Abloy locks, we're about to deploy Salto locks. So we just wanted to, because we, as the PMS, we sit on all of this data. And yes, you can use partners, and there's really phenomenal partners in our marketplace where you can do something really custom. But if you just want a really good, solid solution, we can probably do a good baseline solution. And then depending on what you want to do, you can just build out with partners on the other side. But at the core, I'm like, as a cloud PMS, we've got all of the data in the cloud. Why wouldn't we build this as a custom, like every customer gets access to this solution? We've really doubled down on our guest portal to just make sure that we help hotels drive more revenue, drive more efficiency. We're now seeing 1 in 3 guests will check in online themselves completely if they've booked on the hotel website. And the adoption rate is really phenomenal that we're seeing. And it's because of COVID. Guests, we've educated them that most shops now you pay at the kiosk. And that's the same experience that we're seeing in hotels. People are just used to doing it themselves, and they actually prefer it. And the upsell results, for example, on a kiosk are much higher than the upsell results you see from an employee at a reception desk. I have honestly never, in my 20 years that I've been traveling in hotels, I've never been upsold or attempted to be upsold by a human at a reception desk. I know we all talk about it as an industry, and I travel every single week. It's never been attempted. Maybe I don't look like a very friendly person when I check in, which is very possible. I'm on business, but it's the kiosk has 100% of times upsold me if there was something available. And I think that's really where you can leverage that type of technology to help drive revenue, because computers are just much more consistent than the humans.
Okay. I mean, we've been talking a lot about softwares, obviously, PMS or like our solution. Jordan, what are other key developments, other technologies coming into the hospitality space? Thinking about, I don't know, robotics. We touched a little bit on IoT for parking solution and perhaps logs. What do you see out there besides just the pure, I would say, pure software piece?
Yeah, from a hardware perspective, hardware is just notoriously something that's difficult to scale, not just in hospitality. It's and venture capital wants to stay away from it because it has long development cycles and it's super expensive, and you burn through 50 million before you know whether you have a product or not. We've certainly seen the kind of like Roomba for like robot vacuum for hotels that kind of like tracks room cleanings. We've seen like Relay is a kind of a next generation communications device based here in the US that can now do real-time multilingual translation on the fly using AI. So you can have, people on your hotel staff speaking in different languages to each other in real time and addressing issues. From a hardware perspective, beyond that, honestly, like it's all of the innovation is happening on the software side. The software is eating the world. I think eventually, obviously, we have the Tesla personal robot that as that innovation rolls out to consumers, like the same thing you see with like Netflix, right? It rolls out to us as consumers because that's the biggest market. So if someone's going to go after this big audacious goal, they're going to do it for the biggest market possible. And then they're going to apply it to B2B. So a company that might be applying, Netflix streaming into hotel rooms. There's a bunch of them that do it. And so I think from a robotics and hardware perspective, you just watch what's happening in consumer, and there's going to be a moment when Tesla is scaling like crazy, and they've got the robots in every home, and then they're going to look to new expansion areas. And hospitality is one of the biggest industries on earth, and it's probably one of the first places that they'll look because there's a labor challenge and because there's a huge market.
Okay. I mean, on the Hotel Tech Report, I mean, another recommendation, by the way, there's Hotel Tech Insight, a great podcast you're doing with a lot of hoteliers and case studies. Is there any case study, any discussion you had which stood out to you, like a very great example of application or like implementation of Hotel Tech lately?
Totally, yeah. We had Matt's customer, Carrie Ann Fispick from Strawberry on this week, and the first thing they did, well, I don't know if Mews did it or Strawberry did it, but they got rid of their old shitty on-prem PMS, maybe because Mews bought it and helped them migrate. And then once they had a cloud PMS, they were able to start innovating, and they've implemented Event Temple from the sales perspective. They piloted FlexKeeping at an 800-room hotel, and then starting to roll it out to more properties. They've added a new POS called Munu that's kind of more of a regional POS. So basically, it's just like unlocked all this innovation. Another cool one that Carrie Ann was talking about this week was I think it's called Scout. It's basically a chatbot that they've used. I want to say it's on Microsoft, but we have so many hoteliers on, it's hard to remember who's on Microsoft and who's on Amazon. But essentially, they can ingest all of their Strawberry's SOPs on the back end. So training materials, even Mews like help center articles, and now they have 20,000 employees. So those 20,000 employees now don't have to figure out, oh my gosh, who do I talk to like figure out if this button isn't doing the thing I expected in Mews. Like they can just query the chatbot, and in one place they can answer any question that they need about SOPs, how to handle guests, and literally anything about any property or anything within the business, which is just incredible. So we're seeing a lot of that kind of innovation where I would say these regional chains, if you will, that some of them work with some of the brands, but they have more technology oversight. They have clout, like Strawberry has control over what happens at some of these brands because they're such an important partner for them. And so we're seeing some of those kind of regional scaled partners, but are not like the franchise, corporate office that are driving the innovation forward in the industry. And so that was a really great example from, I think we published it yesterday.
Okay, cool. Yeah, Strawberry being a Mews customer, right, Matt? But
Yeah.
Perhaps there's another good example, another case study from your side, which comes up, like a very, very good implementation, something you see in the marketplace.
In what sense, sorry?
Like a case study, how to implement Hotel Tech in a very efficient way to really drive results, something from your experience lately.
Like some of the most innovative hotelier, for example, one of them is the Social Hub. They used to be the Student Hub, and they've just really embraced the technology, and they've started to, you walk into one of their spaces and there's co-working in the lobby, because the lobby is one of those dead zones where you don't make revenue in a hotel. And with modern technology, you don't have to have a big check-in area. You could just make it a smaller area because a lot of people will self-serve. So what are you going to do with that space? And they've really just added desks in the lobby, and then they have a subscription model in some of their hubs in Spain where you can become a member to sit in a hotel lobby and pay for that. And I'm like, this is so smart. How they're thinking about revenue optimization for every square meter. And one of the things we're hopefully deploying next year is that we start to help hotels measure revenue per guest, revenue per square meter, and really just proving out more than the traditional RevPAR, revenue per available room, that we talk about as an industry, because it doesn't tell you enough about whether you are optimizing your real estate in the best way possible. And then we leverage the technology to say, hey, you've got this big parking lot, and I can see a Mews, it is underutilized. Why don't we put a booking on your website, or why don't we plug in an OTA for parking? You've got all these OTAs where you book your parking in the city. And we now can plug those in through our API, and we integrate with, for example, AccuView, which is this the beams that open up at the entrance of the parking. So when you do your online check-in, you give me your license plate, and then when you get to the hotel, you can just drive into the parking garage. We've booked your spot for you automatically. It's charged to your bill automatically. And we've put this live in a number of hotels now, and it just works. But yes, you've got to upgrade that hardware. And that's often the biggest pain point, like digital keys. You got to put locks in your doors that actually support digital keys. And, that means an upgrade, and there's some cost involved. So there's definitely some cost to upgrade. But then once you've got it, the efficiency that you drive through it is absolutely worth it.
Okay. Cool.
I would say one more, just a quick shameless plug of the podcast. But for Hotel Tech Insider, in 2 weeks, we have an episode coming with Howard Fung from ProInvest Group, who's the head of digital there. I was blown away. I've never learned so much in an hour conversation. I'm sure we're gonna have like 4 more with him, but go subscribe on Spotify or Apple and stay tuned for that one. Because literally anyone in hotels will learn from that, whether you're a tech person or not. Like, you'll have something for your department.
What was one of the things that he said that you loved?
Oh, I just think his approach to technology. He's basically like taken like 4 different hotel groups from on-prem to a cloud PMS, and then like restructured the entire tech stack, built tech teams from the ground up. He pulls out like the entire like data analyst teams and like has a couple of data scientists, and basically gets these kind of like player coaches that are building software using RPA. And he's just like automated basically everything within these hotels. And just constantly experimenting on that idea of like, one of the things, first of all, there's so many hoteliers on our podcast who are afraid to talk about the solutions that they use, and they're like, "Is this a Mews advert?" It's like, no, this isn't. We're just going to talk about tools. If you go to an SEO podcast, they tell you exactly the tools, and they might even screen share the tool that they're using and how they got a result from it. But hoteliers are so afraid to talk about it. It's like, why? Like, talk.
Trade secret. Yeah,
exactly. And Howard is like, oh yeah, like, I used Infor and it was fine, but then I came here and I ended up making a different selection because it wasn't the right fit for me. And here's why it wasn't a good fit for this business. And here's the option that I chose, and here's how I chose it. And like literally step by step through everything that he was thinking. And for me, having so many hoteliers be hesitant to talk about that stuff, I was like, oh my God, he's literally talking about the vendors he likes or he liked and now he doesn't like, and exactly why and what changed, what he was looking for. It's like, we just need more of that. And that's what we're trying to bring on the podcast. It's a little more boring than talking about like culture, company culture, and some of the fluffy stuff in hospitality. But it's awesome. It's how you grow your business.
Cool. So please check it out. I guess we could easily continue our talk for a couple of more hours, but unfortunately we are slowly running out of time already. However, before I let you go, I would like to ask one last question, and it's more about like the future, like 5 to 10 years. So your vision, perhaps. What do you think? How will the hospitality tech space look like? How will the guest journey develop? Are there any, disruptive technologies on the horizon or any other emerging trends? What is your picture of that? And perhaps Jordan, you go first.
Yeah, I think it's like we're obviously watching the changing of the guard with companies like Mews in terms of who will be the large publicly traded companies in this space. And I think the market is expanding, so there's room for more now. Finally, I think going back to Matt's point about the brand stifling innovation, the biggest thing that I'm seeing is like if you look up Marriott Miami, there's 101 Marriott hotels in Miami. So if Steffen, you sell your business, you have $50 million to spare, and you want to go open a hotel in Miami, but the W's right across from your, whatever St. Regis that you're about to open, you're starting to think, why am I paying these massive fees? And if you go back to the role of what a brand was supposed to provide, well, it's like, okay, for sure, Bonvoy adds value. But it used to be SOPs. It used to be like the playbook. It's like, well, now I can kind of use Event Temple and have a salesperson that is really focused on my hotel and knows this property. And I might not need to fill it with, their corporate sales team that's national, that's selling 100 other hotels in the Miami area. Or maybe there's, online booking platforms now for meetings where people can just like find you online. And so, maybe from a marketing perspective, there's meta-search bidding management software that you don't need a corporate marketing team, and maybe you want to have your own website because you don't want to be competing against some of these other properties. And so, in my opinion, technology has unbundled the services that brands offer than the big chains. And that doesn't mean there's no value to it, but there's a certain point where I don't know if it's 101 hotels in Miami, but maybe it's 150, maybe it's 200, where owners say, okay, I'm not opening a Marriott in Miami anymore. And then as on the other side of that, you saw this past week, Marriott announced that they're cutting $90 million in corporate costs. Okay, so they're cutting costs. And that's coming from the SG&A line. So they're cutting costs, which is the services that are delivered to owners, and they're opening more properties. So there's this inflection point where they're delivering less value and they're cutting costs. Like you're competing against more and more properties within their ecosystem. At some point, they're just booking.com. and you use them when you want to, and you're not willing to go into this contract. And so bringing that back to technology, I think in 5-10 years, it's these technology companies that are unbundling the brand and giving hotel and independent hotels a competitive advantage over those brands. Because if you own the W Marriott, the W in South Beach, you can't apply AI to your business unless Marriott's doing it for the most part. And if you're the independent hotel next door, you can try whatever Mews has developed that month and that they're thinking about on their roadmap. And so it makes you a lot more nimble. So I'm not saying that brands are dead. Brands have had an amazing run over the last 20 years. It's incredible to see what they've done. And it's not just the brand itself, it's our whole structure of owner, manager, and operator that's what unlocked growth for Marriott, but it's not what's going to unlock growth for you as a hotel owner. And there's a case to be made now, especially in the age of AI, especially in the age of a new platform emerging, that you may want to be an owner operator of a hotel so that you have flexibility to make business decisions, or the market might pass you.
Okay, very interesting. And Matt, what's your take? Where are we like 5 to 10 years out from now?
First of all, I loved everything that Jordan said. I want to listen to him for another few minutes, just rant on about it, because I thought it was so good. I think one of the things that's really going to shift, because customers expect way more because AI is so good, and the expectation levels are going up, and hotels will have to figure out a way to meet that. And you'll see, like, my whole life is on internet, on LinkedIn. You can probably figure out everything that I care about deeply. That information should be consumed by hotels that I travel to, and they should anticipate the things. I'm hoping that the next week that I track into the hotel, they'll actually try and upsell me. Very unlikely, but that information is widely available. And instead of using our humans to input data into a system, which is what we do today, we should leverage our humans to go above and beyond, and create these really remarkable experiences so that I can actually remember some of the hotel brands that I stay with. And that's the thing that excites me, but it will require a real shift of culture of saying, I'm actually going to deploy my humans to do work that's actually fun, like exceed expectations. And you have to train people for that. And you have to hire a different caliber of person, because you don't need that receptionist that knows the legacy system because they've worked on that system for 20 years. You need to hire that person with strong personality, who gets excited about going the extra mile, who gets excited, has actual passions in how they can drive guest experience. And the system now allows for it, but the personnel that we've hired is not ready for it. And maybe the personnel is the right personnel, but you've got to train them. You've got to liberate them and saying, go and create crazy experiences. I was at this hotel the other day, and I talked about what I was in town to do. I was looking at an apartment, and then I came to my room, and they made this beautiful map of the city, mapping out different areas. And they'd listened to something that I said in check-in, and then they had done something that wasn't expected of them. And I'm like, that's hospitality. That's a hotel that I don't talk about on a podcast. And I'm like, that's what excites me about hospitality. It isn't, can I have your passport and your credit card, and let me just type that data in while I ignore you for 5 minutes. And you just, think, when can you get your plastic key pushed into your hand? We've got to move on from the box standard kind of experiences. And you actually can today, but I think in 5 years, you're going to see a real shift. And those brands that do this right are going to win.
Totally. I think it's kind of like putting a carriage driver in a car for the first time, and the car's not turned on. It's like they just the whole job has been like, do this administrative stuff to like make the operation move like smoothly. And now that stuff's happening, and they're still kind of like going through the motion, clicking away on the computer. Like Howard from ProInvest was saying the other day, I think QT is like one of their luxury brands in Australia. And he was saying that like the front desk is gone, everything's automated, and they have this like, I've never been, so I don't know the full experience, but it's like a woman in a wig who's like an actress who like makes you like feel like you're in an immersive theater when you arrive, and she's like hilarious and like engaging. And it's like creating those kinds of unique experiences in luxury. Obviously, it doesn't have to be like quirky and like straight, funky like that, but like if that's not your brand. But I think it just opens up this whole new muscle memory, this new function that like hotels they haven't had to think about because it wasn't an option. They were just too slammed doing all this administrative stuff.
All right. Perfect. That has been an extremely interesting discussion with many great insights. Matt, Jordan, thank you so much for joining me. It has been a tremendous pleasure. Also, big thank you to our audience for tuning in and following our discussion. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Have a good night or a good day wherever you are. Thank you very much again, and bye-bye.
Nice.
All right, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.